everybody. Today I'll be giving a summary on the short story Toba Tek Singh, written by Saadat Hasan Manto. Toba Tek Singh is considered to be one of the best short stories written on the theme of partition. The story opens a couple of years after the India-Pakistan partition, and the story is set in Lahore Lunatic Asylum. As the story opens, the situation is extremely tense in the asylum as the news about the exchange of lunatics have crept in. According to the final agreement that is signed by the two countries, the Hindu and Sikh lunatics from Pakistan will be sent to India, and the Muslim lunatics from India will be sent to Pakistan, and a date was fixed for this. The asylum dwellers are very much confused about this whole process of agreement, and they know nothing about this newly formed Pakistan. They wanted to know whether they were in India or in Pakistan, and they wondered that if they were in Pakistan, how come a little while ago they were in India? A series of interesting episodes takes place inside the asylum, which invokes a lot of questions in the minds of the readers about this whole process of partition. There's this one lunatic who climbs up a tree and orates for 2 hours on India-Pakistan problems. There's another Muslim lunatic who declares himself as Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and a Sikh lunatic who calls himself Master Tara Singh, and they begin to abuse each other. There's a young Hindu lawyer from Lahore who's heartbroken about the partition as his beloved is now in Amritsar. Then when it comes to the Anglo-Indian lunatics who are in the asylum, they are worried much about what will be served for the breakfast and whether they will get a separate European ward. You can see that all these lunatics have their own problems, and they worry very much perturbed about this whole incident. The story then focuses on the titular character Bishan Singh, who is also known as Toba Tek Singh. He was brought to this asylum some 15 years ago. He was initially a prosperous farmer from the village Toba Tek Singh. When he hears about this whole proposition, he gets obsessed about the location of Toba Tek Singh, and he questions his fellow inmates about it. A few days before the proposed exchange, Bishan Singh's friend Fasil Ding visits him and delivers the news about Bishan Singh's family's relocation to India. He seems very much disinterested in all these affairs, and what he wants to know is the location, like where he just wants to know where Toba Tek Singh is. Finally, the day of exchange comes and the lunatics are taken to the Wagah border. The whole process turns out to be a very difficult task as the lunatics were out of control. Some refused to come out of the bus, few broke loose, some ran naked, some squabbled, and others cried or roared with laughter. When it was Bishan Singh's turn for the exchange, he asked one of the officers where Toba Tek Singh was. And when he understands that it is in Pakistan, he turns away and runs back. And all the officers try to catch hold of him and they try to move him back to India, but he refuses to budge. And then they just leave him for some time because they think that he is not really sound in mind. So they thought, okay, let's wait for some time and then let's see what happens. And then shortly before the sunrise, a scream is heard from Toba Tek Singh, who is now lying flat face forward onto the ground, and his body remained in no man's land between the two barbed wire fences that divided India and Pakistan. That is how the story ends. You can see that Toba Tek Singh is a very powerful satire on the reckless manner in which the partition of India and Pakistan took place. By placing the story in an asylum, Manto takes the liberty to question the idea of sanity. At the end of the story, we're compelled to think whether it is truly the clinically insane people who are mad or whether it is the world outside them.
Thank you, Mridula, for that summary of Toba Tek Singh. I just wanted to reiterate one point the partition has become reckless. You use the word reckless, so I'm just kind of commenting on that. It has become reckless because of the planning of the British administrators. The speed with which the partitioning of the two countries were done is one of the main reasons for that immense amount of bloodshed. So we need to keep that constantly in mind. The role played by the barrister Cyril Radcliffe, who did not have a massive experience of this huge country, and he was invited to do the the division of the two. So that idea of the colonial misadministration is massively responsible for this kind of chaotic scenes, very violent scenes during the partition. So that's something we would like to keep in mind. And we have done another story, Crossing the Ravi, right, by Gulzar. And I want to see if we can draw some parallels between that story, that very brief story, and Toba Tek's story. Both are, Toba Tek Singh is very, very iconic of this partition narrative, and Gulzar is also well known because of its poignant ending. So I was wondering if you are able to draw some comparisons off the top of your mind between these two stories. What are your thoughts?
Definitely, these two stories talk about the partition. It is very disheartening to listen to such stories. When it comes to Toba Tek Singh, there is an element of a distancing effect, I feel, because this is, when you read this story, we think that okay, this is happening in an asylum and all these are lunatics. But there is definitely an underlying meaning behind this whole thing, and he wants to show that we are all like these lunatics, and this country has become a big madhouse. When it comes to the other story, it speaks to us directly. It is very emotional. It talks about a father's dilemma. It talks about a son's dilemma, a husband's dilemma, and it is so sad to. The ending is really sad. The very fact that he himself is the cause for the death of his son who is alive. And in one way, that story talks about the birth of the country.
I'm going to pick up from some of the points that you have mentioned in your commentary. One is that we get a distancing effect in Toba Tek Singh. That's I think one of the reasons for that distancing effect is that story happens after the partition. If you look at the story, it says a few years after the partition, the governments decided to exchange the lunatics. So, there's a literal distancing from the agony of the partition, from the trauma, the visceral, literal trauma of the partition, So that's one of the reasons it's few years down the line, when the dust has settled and people could kind of, But at the same time, while we think that this is a few years down the line, there is also this confusion on the part of the lunatics who are not very sure where a particular, a region belongs to, whether it belongs to Pakistan or to India. So that again takes us back into the, the moment of the partition when people were confused. So there is a past as well as a present which creates the, a sense of confusion, right? And even timelines seem to be blurred. Right, because of the back and forth movement. But in the case of Crossing the Ravi, it happens in the middle when people are migrating, right? Migration is one of the important tropes
Yes.
of this part, tropes as well as the feature of this partition, people moving across the borders, right? So it is very immediate in that regard. And another point that comes to mind is the fracturing of families.
Yes.
That's a common theme in both these stories,
Yes.
right? We have Toba Tek Singh being taken away from his family, just as the other lunatics have been too, right? So they become individuals disconnected with their families and with their land, right? The lunatic becomes a kind of they become a kind of a representative figures for that kind of idea of being divided from your near and dear, right? The same thing happens in Crossing the Ravi, isn't it?
Yes.
So with Bishan Singh leaving his parents behind, the mother in the Gurudwara, the father dead, and he's moving forward to a new country to make a new life, and along the way he loses his progeny, his descendants. So the family is being split time and again for various because of various reasons. So that fracturing of identities, shattering of relationships becomes totemic of this idea of partition itself. Yeah. So anything else that you can think about in terms of these two stories?
The idea of religion to some extent. In Crossing the River, you can see that the whole concept of him feeling secure in Gurudwara, yes. He knows that all of them are going through a dark phase, but there is a sense of community, and he although he knows that he will not be really safe out there, but by seeing that there are a lot of people who are there who are going through the same the problems, that gives you a sense of assurance that we are not really alone here. And in Toba Tek Singh, you can see again religion. You can see that there's no people are not divided based on religion or caste or community out there. Everybody is same. And there's this. I even pointed out that there's this lunatic who climbs up a tree, and he goes on giving them people lectures on the problems that India and Pakistan faces. And then as soon as he comes down, he hugs his fellow inmates and he says that I don't want you to let go. Although there is some difference between them, he is a Muslim and the other people are Hindus. He hugs a Hindu, and there's this blurring of religion or whatever, how people are divided. And that I think it is a predominant trope or
I think there's a weird sense of community among the lunatics, right? Lunacy becomes the bond. The idea of lunacy, either literal or metaphoric or convenient, because there are also some murderers, masquerading as lunatics, isn't it? So lunacy becomes a bond that links all these individuated figures in that, institution. And they're also very kind of weirdly self-aware, strangely self-aware at moments. One example would be that that a lawyer, right, who despite being so much in love with his beloved, who has jilted him, and he still kind of longs for her and things like that, but he also is aware that if he goes to India, he will not be able to set up his profession, he will not flourish, because all his roots, all his contacts, all his community are back in a different country. So more than the importance that he gives to romance, the survival, the profession, your career identity is rooted to the land, in which you were born. So that kind of, self-consciousness is also the subtext, amongst this bunch of lunatics. So that's also very interesting. Despite their lunacy, they are also very, very, aware. And so that also creates a strange, effect on the reader. isn't it? And the way they can comment on all these various political leaders and things like that. Isn't it?
And this idea that there are these murderers who are also dwellers of these asylums, and although they are sane mentally, they are not able to make out what is happening.
Absolutely.
But these lunatics, to some extent, they know this whole process and they are aware.
Yeah.
But when compared to them, they are much more sane, but they're in the process of insanity because of this.
Correct. So the underlying idea seems to be nobody could make sense of this kind of cataclysmic event, which is a direct legacy of this colonial rule, and I think that's something we shouldn't forget when we get involved within the mechanics of the text. That this historical, intervention on the part of an empire is a major reason for this kind of schizophrenic, understanding of the state of affairs on the part of the lunatics, right? There's another thing which is intriguing: the episodic nature. The character sketch that you get. There's less of plot and more of character sketches, right? So you can see that Mento wants to kind of give you a sample from every walk of life in the society. So which is why we get that sketches instead of a very coherent plot. There's hardly any plot. They are supposed to be exchanged. They're taken to the border. One person doesn't want to cross over because his land is back home in Pakistan, and he dies. Right? There's hardly any plot. It's a very bare-boned kind of narrative trajectory that we have. Right? But there's a small a small world which kind of is given to, a familial world is given to Toba Tek Singh through his daughter, right? His neighbor who comes to have a chat kind of, gives us that glimpse. So it's a kind of much removed, family sketch that we get, twice removed, but then we get that glimpse, and that gives us that, that connection, the emotional connection, the very personal connection to Toba Tek Singh, the fact that he has lost his daughter and that his family have moved to India. So I think while there is a kind of an episodic, character-driven kind of narrative, that emotional connection is given through that little girl, the young girl who is present yet absent from the story. So the trauma is kind of hidden. The trauma becomes the subtext, and it's doubly tragic that the father can't realize. The father cannot relate to that kind of agony the daughter has undergone, right? Because he's gone mad, and all he can remember are his lands. Just as the lawyer is, kind of worried about his profession, Toba Tek Singh wants to belong to his village where his identity is anchored, right? So that's something which is kind of hidden. But in as you pointed out, in Crossing the Ravi, it's very kind of on the surface. It's immediate. Two babies, traveling on top of a train at this moment. It immediately kind of draws attention to that, pathos associated with that kind of migration. Right.
I think the Gulsar wants us to really feel what he wants us to feel in Crossing the River, because he dictates, okay, this is that, and this is how things are done. But when it comes to Toba Tek Singh, it's up to the readers. We can feel for any of these characters, and there are a lot of underlying emotions behind all these characters, not just the titular character. Crossing the River, it is extremely emotional because the writer wanted it to be so. He wants us to be aware of the bloodshed and things that had happened during that time, and it's very evident. But here it is not all that poignant, but still there is that sense of we feel that we have that baggage with us when we read it.
And it's very weird or strange that there is no reaction from the parents right? Either Darshan Singh or Shahini, when they realize that it's a live baby which has been thrown out of the top of the train, right? There's no comment from either of them. The silence is deafening, wouldn't you think?
Yes.
Instead, what we have is other commentaries about the nation. So the personal reactions are deliberately kind of suppressed, and that I thought was very interesting, and it connects me to the other story in the flood which we were discussing earlier, that there is no reaction from Chenan when he sees the dead body of the dog, in the waters when he comes back once the flood has receded. We don't get any comment from him, and that in itself makes us feel massively for the character going through this kind of experience. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The lack of voice on the part of Shahini and Darshan Singh is very interesting.
Yes.
Right. So the other thing that I wanted to think about is that, again, I think we have talked about this, the lunacy that's there in that moment of migration when they're not able to think through. Individual thought processes are curtailed by the mass thought process when Darshan Singh is forced to react, at the prompting of others.
Yes.
Right, and that's very interesting, and that compares, in a different way with Toba Tek Singh, who cannot be compelled by anybody to migrate. Right, he resists that very strongly. So he's a very individuated character, isn't it? With strong feelings for what he believes to be right and wrong. So that mass psychosis is not affecting him. Strangely, right? So, and the other interesting thing is Toba Tek Singh is the name that the others give him. Right. So, everybody sees him as being part of that village. Right. It's a sense that everybody has, but nobody can do anything about it. Right. So everybody knows that he's the man from Toba Tek Singh village, and he belongs to Toba Tek Singh, but they can't do anything. Right, so he has to cross over that border to go back, to go home, to a different home. Right, so there is awareness, but people are vulnerable, helpless. That kind of feeling is also, given in these stories. Right. All right. Thank you for your thoughts.